Stop moment before you continue watching. Ask yourself a question most people avoid asking. Why do some individuals walk through chaos without breaking, while others collapse under pressure, criticism, or betrayal? Why do some people become impossible to control, manipulate, or intimidate? And why do others spend their entire lives feeling like invisible forces are constantly holding them back? Most people believe the answer is simple. They blame their circumstances. They blame difficult bosses, jealous coworkers, unfair systems, or bad luck. But the deeper truth is far more uncomfortable, because the forces that truly control most lives are rarely visible. They operate quietly, through manipulation, through emotional pressure, through social expectations, and through one weakness that almost everyone shares: the need to be accepted, the need to be understood, the need to prove themselves. History shows something fascinating. The people who rise above chaos are not always the most talented, they are not always the most intelligent, and they are definitely not always the most moral. Instead, they share something far more powerful. They understand human nature, and more importantly, they understand how the world actually works, not how people wish it worked, but how it truly operates beneath the surface. This is where the controversial philosophy of Niccolò Machiavelli enters the conversation. For centuries, his name has been associated with manipulation, cold strategy, and ruthless power. But Machiavelli was not teaching people how to become evil. He was revealing something far more unsettling. He was exposing the hidden mechanics of human behavior. He was describing the uncomfortable reality that power does not belong to the most virtuous person in the room. Power belongs to the person who understands the game. Think about your own experiences for a moment. Have you ever seen the most capable employee ignored while someone less competent gets promoted? Have you ever been loyal to someone only to realize that loyalty was never returned? Have you ever tried to explain your intentions, hoping people would understand you, only to discover that the more you explained, the weaker you seemed? These situations are not accidents. They are patterns. They reveal something important about human psychology. Most people believe life rewards honesty, kindness, and hard work in a simple and predictable way. But reality is more complicated. Human beings are emotional. They are competitive. They are driven by perception, influence, and power. And once you begin to understand this, everything changes. You begin to see conversations differently. You notice manipulation where you once saw misunderstanding. You recognize emotional traps that once controlled you, and slowly, you stop reacting like everyone else, because the truth is this: nobody can truly hold you back. Nobody can truly break you. And nobody can truly control you unless they control your emotions, unless they control your perception, unless they control how you respond to pressure. The moment you understand this, you step into a different psychological reality. One where you are no longer naive about human nature, one where you stop playing the role others expect from you, and one where you begin developing the most dangerous form of power a person can possess: silent control over themselves. Because the strongest individuals in history shared one defining trait: they were not loud. They were not desperate for approval. They were not easily provoked. Instead, they observed. They adapted. They understood people better than people understood themselves. And once someone reaches that level of awareness, something remarkable happens. The world stops controlling them, and they begin moving through life with a calm, calculated strength that few people can challenge. But to reach that point, you must first confront the most common weakness that quietly destroys influence, authority, and respect. A weakness that almost everyone believes is a strength: the habit of constantly explaining yourself. There is a habit that quietly destroys authority, confidence, and influence. Most people practice it every single day without realizing the damage it causes. It is the need to constantly explain yourself, to justify your decisions. To defend your actions. To make sure everyone understands your intentions. At first, this behavior seems reasonable, even noble. After all, honesty and transparency are usually praised as virtues. We are taught that explaining ourselves builds trust and prevents misunderstanding. But human psychology rarely works that way. In reality, the more someone feels the need to constantly explain themselves, the more they communicate something deeper: uncertainty. Think about how people behave around true authority. When a confident leader makes a decision, they rarely feel the need to defend every detail. They speak clearly. They state their direction, and then they move forward. They do not beg for approval. They do not attempt to win every argument. And most importantly, they do not feel pressured to justify their existence to everyone around them. Why? Because power often lives in controlled mystery. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He observed that leaders who try too hard to please everyone slowly lose the respect of those they lead. The more they explain, the more they invite judgment. When people sense hesitation, they begin testing boundaries. Questions turn into challenges, curiosity turns into doubt, and suddenly the person who was trying to appear reasonable begins to look weak. You can see this dynamic in everyday life. Imagine a manager who constantly explains every decision to their team, hoping to avoid conflict. At first, employees appreciate the openness, but over time, something subtle changes. People start questioning every choice. They debate instructions. They feel comfortable pushing back, not because the manager is wrong, but because the manager unintentionally surrendered psychological authority. Now imagine a different leader. This person communicates clearly, but briefly. They listen more than they talk. When they make a decision, they move forward calmly. They are not rude. They are not arrogant. But they are not desperate to justify themselves either. And because of that, people treat their words differently. Silence, when used wisely, creates gravity. It signals confidence. It suggests that your decisions are not fragile, that they do not require constant defense. Of course, this does not mean refusing all communication. Strong leaders still explain important ideas when necessary, but they do not explain themselves out of insecurity. They do it with intention, because every explanation should serve a purpose, not a fear. Once you begin to understand this, something powerful happens. You stop trying to convince everyone. You stop defending every decision. And slowly, people start seeing you differently, not because you became louder, but because you became harder to question, which leads to an even deeper truth about human behavior. The fastest way someone can gain power over you is by controlling your emotions. There's one weakness that makes even the smartest people easy to control. It is not lack of intelligence. It is not lack of skill. It is emotional reaction. Human beings are emotional creatures. Anger, frustration, pride, and fear influence decisions far more than logic ever does. And because of this, anyone who can control your emotions can quietly control your behavior. Think about how arguments usually unfold. Someone says something offensive. You react. Instantly, your voice changes. Your emotions rise, and within seconds, the situation is no longer under your control. The other person may appear calm. They may even appear slightly amused, because they know something important. They pushed a button, and you reacted exactly as expected. In that moment, the balance of power shifts. Niccolo Machiavelli observed this pattern repeatedly in politics and leadership. He understood that emotional instability is one of the easiest weaknesses to exploit. A ruler who reacts impulsively becomes predictable. An opponent who can provoke anger gains an advantage, and a person who loses control of their emotions often reveals far more than they intend to. This is why some of the most powerful individuals in history share a strange characteristic. They appear calm, even in tense situations, not because they feel nothing, but because they understand something most people ignore. Emotion is information, but reaction is a choice. When someone insults you, that moment creates a psychological test. Most people react immediately because their ego demands a response, but powerful individuals pause. They observe. They analyze the intention behind the behavior. Was the comment meant to provoke? Was it a test of confidence? Or was it simply a reflection of the other person's insecurity? This small pause creates a massive advantage. Because when you do not react emotionally, something interesting happens. The other person becomes uncomfortable. They expected anger. They expected defensiveness. Instead, they encounter silence and calm observation. This changes the psychological atmosphere of the entire interaction. Now they are the one who feels uncertain. Now they are the one wondering what you are thinking, and suddenly the control they hope to gain disappears. You can see this dynamic in negotiations, leadership, and even everyday social situations. The person who stays calm during conflict often becomes the center of gravity in the room. Their presence slows the pace of chaos. Their silence forces others to reveal more than they intended, and their emotional discipline sends a powerful signal. This is someone who cannot be easily manipulated, of course. Emotional control does not mean suppressing feelings forever. It means choosing the right moment to respond. Powerful individuals feel emotions just like everyone else, but they do not let emotions make decisions for them. They respond strategically, not impulsively, because once someone learns to control their reactions, they become far more difficult to influence, and this creates a different kind of respect. But emotional control alone is not enough. There is another mistake that quietly invites people to take advantage of you, a mistake that many people mistake for virtue. The belief that kindness alone will protect you. Kindness is one of the most praised virtues in society. From childhood, people are taught to be generous, forgiving, and understanding, to give others the benefit of the doubt, to avoid conflict whenever possible, and in many situations, kindness truly is a beautiful quality. But there is a darker truth about human nature that most people eventually discover the hard way. Kindness without strength often attracts exploitation. This does not mean people are naturally evil, but humans instinctively test boundaries. They observe how far they can go before resistance appears. If someone constantly sacrifices their own needs to keep the peace, others slowly become comfortable taking more. Favor becomes an expectation, patience becomes permission. And respect slowly disappears. Machiavelli recognized this pattern centuries ago when he studied leaders and rulers. He noticed that those who relied only on kindness often lost authority, not because they lacked good intentions, but because they lacked the power to enforce boundaries. People admired their kindness, but they did not fear disappointing them, and when respect disappears, control follows soon after. Think about situations that happen every day. A coworker who always says yes to extra tasks eventually becomes the person everyone relies on to do the work no one else wants. A friend who constantly forgives disrespect slowly becomes someone whose boundaries are ignored. A leader who avoids confrontation may begin with loyal followers, but over time discipline weakens. None of this happens instantly. It happens slowly, quietly, through small moments where strength should have appeared but did not. The truth is, people respond differently when kindness is combined with strength. When someone is compassionate, but also capable of saying no, the psychological dynamic changes. Their kindness feels genuine rather than weak. Their generosity feels intentional rather than automatic, and their presence commands a different kind of respect. Machiavelli often spoke about the balance between being loved and being feared. His idea was frequently misunderstood as an endorsement of cruelty, but the deeper lesson was about stability. A leader who is loved but incapable of enforcing boundaries eventually loses control. A leader who is feared but never respected eventually faces rebellion. But someone who combines fairness with quiet strength creates balance. People know where the limits are, and that clarity creates stability. In everyday life, the same principle applies. Strength does not mean aggression. It does not mean arrogance. It simply means understanding that kindness should never come at the cost of self-respect. When people realize that your generosity has limits, they begin treating your kindness differently. They value it more because it is no longer something they can take for granted. And once someone learns to combine kindness with strength, something interesting happens. People start observing them more carefully because strength has a way of changing how others behave. But the most powerful individuals take this idea one step further. They do something that most people rarely practice. They speak less. And they observe far more than anyone realizes, because in the silent spaces between words, human nature reveals itself. In a world where everyone is trying to be heard, the most powerful position is often the one that listens. Most people feel uncomfortable with silence. When a conversation pauses, they rush to fill the space. They speak quickly, explain more than necessary, and reveal far more about themselves than they realize. But silence has a strange psychological effect. It makes people talk. And when people talk freely, they reveal their intentions, insecurities, ambitions, and fears. Machiavelli understood that the true advantage in any interaction often belongs to the person who gathers the most information, not the person who speaks the most. This is why strategic observation is one of the most underrated forms of intelligence. When you observe carefully, patterns begin to appear. You notice who seeks attention in every conversation. You notice who changes behavior depending on who is in the room. You notice who speaks confidently but avoids responsibility. And slowly, you begin to understand something important. Words often hide the truth. Behavior reveals it. Think about the quiet person in a meeting who rarely interrupts others, while everyone else competes to express their opinions. This person studies reactions. They watch who agrees too quickly. They notice who becomes defensive when challenged. They observe who grows uncomfortable when the conversation shifts in certain directions. By the time they finally speak, they already understand the emotional landscape of the room. Their words carry more weight because they arrive with awareness. Silence also creates a subtle form of psychological pressure. When someone finishes speaking and expects an immediate response, your calm pause can change the atmosphere of the conversation. The other person begins to wonder what you are thinking. Did they say something wrong? Did they reveal too much? In that moment of uncertainty, people often begin explaining themselves further. They reveal more details. They attempt to justify their position. And without asking a single question, you gain deeper insight into their mindset. This is why experienced negotiators and leaders often speak less than others. They understand that information is power. And information is rarely gained by dominating a conversation. It is gained by observing the small details others overlook. The tone of someone's voice, the hesitation before answering a question, the subtle shift in body language when a sensitive topic appears. These signals tell stories that words never reveal. Over time, this habit of observation creates a powerful advantage. You begin to understand people before they fully understand you. You recognize manipulation attempts before they succeed. You sense hidden tensions before they explode into conflict. And when you finally decide to act, your actions are guided by knowledge rather than assumption. But there is another layer to this psychological game, because observation alone does not create influence. Influence appears when people begin forming beliefs about who you are, and those beliefs are rarely based on reality. They are based on perception. Power is rarely about reality. It is almost always about perception. Think about it. How many times have you known someone who seemed confident, capable, or untouchable, only to discover their actual skills were far less impressive than their image suggested? And yet, the way they were perceived allowed them to rise above everyone else. Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. He recognized that people rarely respond to the truth of your abilities. They respond to how competent, controlled, and confident you appear. The perception of strength often outweighs actual strength. The perception of intelligence often outweighs actual knowledge. And the perception of calm decisiveness can silence the loudest critics. The psychological principle is simple. Humans judge based on what they see and feel, not what they know objectively. If someone appears unshakable, others assume they are unshakable. If someone speaks with authority, people subconsciously assign them credibility, even if they disagree internally. Consider the everyday world. A manager who carries themselves with confidence commands attention, even in moments of uncertainty. A coworker who presents ideas decisively gains influence, while someone equally knowledgeable but hesitant is overlooked. Even in social situations, perception shapes interactions. The person who appears secure and self-sufficient attracts trust, respect, and often loyalty. This does not mean that perception should be fake or manipulative. The key is alignment. Your actions, decisions, and presence should support the image you intend to project. Every gesture, every word, and even silence contributes to how people perceive you psychologically. Perception influences behavior. When others believe you are competent, in control, they are less likely to challenge you. When they perceive you as unpredictable or discerning, they are more likely to reveal their true intentions. Every interaction becomes a subtle negotiation, where the person perceived as stronger holds the advantage. Machiavelli emphasized that leaders should always appear capable, even if the internal reality is less certain. The world reacts to appearances because most people rarely investigate deeper. By consciously managing perception, you can shape outcomes without raising conflict or forcing obedience. Perception also affects emotional influence. People adjust their behavior based on what they believe about you. If they see composure, they mirror composure. If they see calm strength, they mirror restraint. Your internal state begins to ripple outward, creating subtle shifts in how others act and respond. In short, perception is a form of silent power. It is a tool that allows someone to influence situations and people without overt aggression. And when combined with silence, observation, and emotional control. It becomes almost untouchable because ultimately, people respond not to what you are, but to what they believe you are. Curiosity hook. People respond to what they believe you are, not to what you actually are. One of the greatest weaknesses in human behavior is the desperate need for approval. From an early age, we are taught to seek validation from parents, teachers, peers, and society, to be liked, accepted, and praised, to conform to expectations. But attachment to approval comes with a hidden cost. When your sense of self depends on what others think, you surrender control over your life. Your emotions, decisions, and even confidence become hostage to the opinions of others. And the moment someone recognizes this, they gain influence over you. Machiavelli observed that leaders who were emotionally dependent on approval became manipulable. Their actions were no longer guided by strategy, but by the reactions of others. Their strength diminished because it was tied to the fleeting judgments of those around them. Strategic detachment, by contrast, is a form of psychological freedom. It is the ability to stand alone without seeking validation. It is the courage to act in alignment with your own understanding, rather than reacting to the expectations of the crowd. Detachment does not mean isolation. It does not mean coldness or apathy. It means independence of thought, emotional resilience, and clarity of purpose. The detached person moves through life without fear of judgment. They speak, act, and decide based on strategy, not popularity. This mindset changes the way people perceive you. Others may try to provoke you, to push you into emotional reactions or conformity. But when you remain unaffected, calm, and self-directed, something subtle but powerful happens. People begin respecting your autonomy. They may not understand it, but they sense it. And that perception becomes influence. Consider the difference between two individuals. One constantly asks for opinions before acting, fears disapproval, and hesitates at every decision. The other observes, decides, and acts decisively, knowing they do not need anyone's approval to validate their choices. Who holds the power? Who shapes the environment around them? The answer is clear. Strategic detachment also allows for clearer observation. When you are not emotionally invested in approval, you can assess situations objectively. You can see motives, hidden agendas, and subtle manipulations more clearly. You become the silent observer, someone who moves deliberately while others are distracted by validation seeking. The psychological advantage of detachment cannot be overstated. It transforms vulnerability into strength, dependence into autonomy, reaction into strategy. The moment you stop needing approval, you stop being predictable. You stop being manipulated. You stop being limited by the opinions of others. And in that space, true power begins to emerge. Curiosity hook. The moment you stop needing approval, you become dangerous. Adversity is often seen as punishment, a test of endurance, or simply bad luck. Most people fear it. They try to avoid it, escape it, or numb themselves to it. But the truth is far more powerful. Adversity is not the enemy. It is a teacher. Machiavelli understood that the crucible of difficulty reveals true strength. The challenges that break most people are the very moments that forge resilience, strategy, and intelligence in those who survive. Those who learn to navigate hardship do not simply endure, they transform. Think about life's most formidable individuals. Rarely were they handed comfort or security. Instead, they faced betrayal, failure, and relentless pressure. And every setback forced them to adapt, to think differently, to cultivate patience, to sharpen perception. They became masters of strategy because the world demanded it. Psychologically, hardship triggers growth. The mind must stretch to solve problems it has never encountered. Emotional endurance is tested. Boundaries are pushed. And in the process, the person learns patterns, motivations, and vulnerabilities, both in themselves and in others. This principle applies to every facet of life. A person who experiences professional sabotage learns to read colleagues' intentions more clearly. A person who is betrayed in personal relationships develops sharper intuition and stronger boundaries. Even societal obstacles, when approached strategically, reveal hidden opportunities for advancement. But there is a subtle psychological trap most people fall into. They perceive adversity as a reflection of personal failure. They feel victimized, angry, or resentful. And in that state, they react impulsively. They lash out. They retreat. They waste energy resisting circumstances instead of analyzing them. The powerful, however, adopt a different mindset. They understand that adversity is a mirror, reflecting both the world and their own strengths and weaknesses. They do not react blindly. They observe, they adapt, and they leverage the situation to their advantage. Every obstacle becomes a lesson. Every difficulty becomes a test of composure. Every conflict becomes a training ground for strategy. Over time, these experiences accumulate into psychological armor. A person shaped by adversity becomes difficult to manipulate, influence, or break because they have faced situations that would terrify the unprepared. Adversity also teaches patience, foresight, and subtlety. When someone has been forced to wait, endure, and navigate complex challenges, they no longer act impulsively. They act strategically. And strategy is a form of quiet power if you can resist. In short, pressure does not break strong minds. It sharpens them. The trials you face are not setbacks. They are the forge where your unbreakable self is created. Curiosity hook. Pressure does not break strong minds. It sharpens them. Predictability is one of the fastest ways to lose control over your own life. When people can anticipate your reactions, they can manipulate you. They can provoke you, influence decisions, or corner you into choices that benefit them. Predictability is vulnerability, and yet, most people live in patterns so obvious that anyone paying attention can exploit them. Machiavelli understood that unpredictability is a strategic advantage. He observed leaders who maintained an element of mystery. Their actions were deliberate, but not entirely foreseeable. This unpredictability kept allies cautious, opponents wary, and the balance of power firmly in their hands. Being unpredictable does not mean being irrational or reckless. It means mastering the art of subtle variation. It means resisting the pressure to respond the same way every time. It means understanding the expectations of others, and then deciding whether to fulfill them, delay, or completely redirect them. Consider social and professional situations. A colleague always agrees with the group, revealing their thought process and limitations. They become easy to influence. Another remains silent, then offers insight at unexpected moments. Their timing is unpredictable, their reasoning precise. Others are forced to recalibrate, uncertain of how they will respond next. In negotiations, unpredictability is even more powerful. When a person's reactions cannot be anticipated, counterparts are forced to overthink, hesitate, and reveal their true intentions. By contrast, someone who reacts in the same way each time becomes predictable, and therefore controllable. Psychologically, unpredictability creates respect. People understand that you are not easily cornered, that your behavior cannot be assumed, that influence cannot be taken for granted. Unpredictable individuals create tension and curiosity simultaneously, a subtle form of psychological leverage. To cultivate unpredictability, start with observation. Understand how people expect you to react, then occasionally disrupt that expectation. Stay calm, speak thoughtfully, vary your approaches. Small, deliberate deviations from routine are enough to create uncertainty in others' minds. Importantly, unpredictability is paired with internal consistency. Your decisions are not random. They follow strategy. The appearance of unpredictability comes from controlled flexibility, not chaos. When mastered, this trait transforms interactions. People stop taking you for granted. Attempts to manipulate or provoke you become ineffective. You regain the upper hand simply by being intentionally difficult to read. The ultimate lesson: the moment people think they fully understand you, you lose power. And the moment you embrace unpredictability, you regain it. Curiosity hook: the moment people think they understand you, they start controlling you. Some people move through life untouched by chaos, betrayal, or pressure. They do not break under criticism. They do not crumble under failure. And they do not bend to the will of others. What separates them from the rest is not luck. It is not extraordinary talent. It is a mindset, a combination of discipline, awareness, and emotional mastery that makes them unshakable. An unbreakable person has learned to control what others cannot: their emotions, their perception, and their response to the world. They do not react impulsively. They do not seek approval. They do not allow external events to dictate internal stability. Instead, they observe, analyze, and act with precision, psychologically. This mindset transforms vulnerability into power. When threats arise, whether personal, professional, or social, the unbreakable person remains composed. They absorb the pressure, understand the forces at play, and respond strategically. Others may panic, argue, or react emotionally, but the unbreakable individual maintains clarity. Part of this mindset involves detachment. They do not depend on validation from others. Their sense of worth is internal, not derived from applause, praise, or approval. This independence makes them harder to influence or manipulate because no external force can easily sway their judgment. Another crucial aspect is strategic patience. They understand that timing often determines the outcome of events. Immediate reaction is rarely necessary. Waiting, observing, and choosing the right moment to act multiplies the effect of their decisions. Real-life examples are everywhere. Leaders who endure betrayals and emerge stronger. Individuals who face adversity repeatedly yet never lose composure. Or negotiators who turn tense situations into advantage simply by staying calm. The common thread is always the same. Control over oneself precedes control over circumstances. Finally, the unbreakable person combines strength with subtlety. They do not need to dominate conversations or situations. Their presence alone carries weight. Their decisions are deliberate, precise, and rarely questioned because they radiate confidence grounded in understanding. This is the pinnacle of psychological mastery, a state where external pressures exist, but internal equilibrium is untouchable. Where influence is gained not through aggression, manipulation, or force, but through quiet, disciplined power. Becoming unbreakable is not instantaneous. It is cultivated over time through adversity, observation, emotional control, and strategic decision-making. Curiosity hook. Unbreakable people aren't born. They are built. By now, you have explored a journey few dare to take. You've seen the hidden rules of influence, the silent forces that shape human behavior, and the subtle strategies that determine who rises and who falls. The lessons of Machiavelli are often misunderstood. They are not about manipulation for selfish gain, nor about cruelty as a tool. They are about awareness, seeing the world as it truly is, rather than as we wish it to be. They are about discipline, observation, and strategic mastery of oneself. Reflect on the truths revealed. Explaining yourself too often weakens authority. Emotional reactions invite control. Kindness without strength creates vulnerability. Silence and observation reveal what words conceal. Perception can outweigh reality. Detachment frees you from influence. Adversity can forge resilience. Unpredictability prevents manipulation, and an unbreakable mindset turns chaos into opportunity. These principles are not abstract theories. They are tools for living with quiet power, tools for navigating social, professional, and personal landscapes without surrendering control. The philosophical awakening is simple yet profound. The world is not fair. People are not always good, and expecting morality to protect you is a path to disappointment. But understanding human nature and mastering your response to it transforms you into someone who cannot be easily broken, controlled, or stopped. Power, in its most sustainable form, is not loud or aggressive. It is calm, strategic, observant, independent. It is the quiet force that moves silently, unseen, but impossible to ignore once it acts. Imagine moving through life with this clarity, observing patterns others overlook, responding when necessary, never reacting impulsively, maintaining composure under pressure, knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. This is the mindset of someone who is untouchable, not by force, but by mastery of self. And now, the final question for reflection: if the world will never adjust to your expectations, will you adjust to it, or will you rise above it? The path forward is yours to choose. Observe deeply, act deliberately, and cultivate the quiet, unshakable power within you. Soft CTA, watch, reflect, and apply these principles. Begin your journey towards psychological mastery and see the world in a way few ever will.